And today we're back with a bit of a different video. We're not going to take a look at a warband in specific in Warcry, but we're going to look at a mechanic more in general, which is movement and flight. So this is what I've been having a very hard time with quantifying and seeing how good different kinds of movement and also the ability flying are. And yeah, that's like the one big stat I'm missing in my warband reviews for most of the fighters really, is how good are they, how good is their flying abilities and how good are they movement wise, because that's something I've always talked about, said hey, low movement is bad and so on, but I've not really been able to put my finger on how good it actually is. So what we're doing today is taking a look at a way I've come up with to figure out how important movement is and to put a bit of a quantifier on it. This isn't the perfect method at all. Please let me know what you think about it and if you have any ways to improve it. But so this is what I've come up with. Recently I've played a mission where we had to get into the opponent's territory, which was basically move our models to the opposite battlefield edge to get them off and therefore earn points. So in the greatest scenario there, what you have to do is move from one far corner of the battlefield to the other far corner. The normal Warcry battlefield is 30 inches long, so 30 inches is the longest you'll have to move. Now to figure out how much terrain you have to cross on that way, I tried to divide all the possible setups for the Warcry starter set into like 3 piles. I did a light density, light terrain density, medium density, and dense density for the terrain. So I've just looked at the card and looked, hey, how many terrain pieces are there on this card and so on. In general, I was able to identify 10 with very light terrain, 11 with medium terrain, and 15 with highly dense terrain. And then I've looked at, okay, how will this affect my movement across, right? So what I did was for the light terrain, I said, okay, how many small obstacles are there? And those would be our walls and our fences. If I draw a straight line across, and how many big obstacles would there be if I drew a straight line across and tried to walking from one point to the other. So those are my two obstacles really I am looking at. And then for every single card I've looked at, hey, I've drawn a line across and looked at how many small obstacles are there, how many big obstacles are there. And then I've averaged it out. So for my light density cards, I figured out that there's 0.3 obstacles on average, small obstacles on average, and 0.5 big obstacles. So in half of the cards you'll have to climb over one building or move around it, but for this we are using climbing over. And then I said, okay, so if you have to climb a small obstacle, it's going to cost you 1.5 inches normally. So one of the like smaller walls or the fences, that's about 1.5 inch to get across. To get over a big obstacle is going to be 3 inches because you have to climb up one wall, but you can just jump on the other side. You don't have to waste movement on that. So it's going to be 3 inches for that. And then I just multiplied the average of how often they actually occur and the movement penalty, and this is the penalty you'll get on average on when crossing the 30 inches. So as you can see, for our light density terrain, on average you're going to need 2 inches more than the 30 inches it takes to get across. Then something interesting, when doing the same for the medium and the dense terrain, I figured out that actually both of these are basically the same. So even though to me it looked like there would be more terrain in the way and so on the denser ones, basically the things I identified as medium and the ones I identified as dense are the exact same. So it's gonna be 4 inches on top of the 30 inches you have to move across. Yeah, so that's what this slide is. And then I've put this into a bit of a nicer, view. And yeah, I went for all the movement values that are in Warcry. I think these are them. There's 3-inch movement is the lowest. That's for some things like the Nurgle Rodbringers or for the Armator, the dwarves. And then we've got 10 movement as the highest, which is on some very high mobility pieces like the Squighopper Bounces or the Idoneth Deepkin Eels and so on. Okay, so then I said, okay, how many actions does a fighter need to get across these 30 inches of terrain? Okay, so to cross the entire battlefield. If you have movement 3, for example, you'll need 10.7 actions to cross the entire battlefield. So that would be more than 5 battle rounds, because you only get 2 actions per battle round. So you'd need really more than 5 battle rounds to get across the entire field. This is very unlikely to happen in Warcry because most battles are limited to 3 to 4 and at maximum 5 battle rounds. So with movement 3, even on the light terrain cards, it's very unlikely that you'll ever get across. On the denser terrain cards, obviously even less so. Takes 11.3 actions, so yeah, you'd need full 6 battle rounds to even get across. And then I've inserted this fly thing, which says, well, you ignore these terrains, so basically it's just 30 inch of movement you'll need. So even if you're 3-inch movement, you'll be able to get there in exactly 5 battle rounds. So 10 actions, which is 5 turns. Right, that's what we've got it here. So equally, we can look at all of these and let's see that for 4 inches, it's already a lot less. They can get across light terrain in exactly 4 turns. So if you don't have the densest of terrains and you have 4 battle rounds to get across, if you really keep running and don't get like sidetracked with your fighters, you can make it to the other side. So that's good news for the 4-inch movement warbands. On denser terrain, you won't be able to make it. So as you can see, the 8.5 here, that means that you're going to need more than 4 activations of a fighter to make it, and that's not going to be enough then to get across. With fly again, though, you'll definitely get there. For a 5-inch movement, obviously, it's not quite enough to get across in 3 turns. So even with 5-inch movement with it, which is already very good for most fighters, you won't be able to make it from one edge of the battlefield to the other within 3 turns. Only if you have fly. So if you have movement 5 and flight, you will be able to get across exactly in 3 turns. Movement 6, entirely different story. They can get there in 3 turns, no problem, even across dense terrain. So you don't need flight to be able to get across dense terrain in 3 activations. So yeah, good. Movement 6 is very good already. And yeah, flight gives you a bit of extra movement there, but it's not that important. And then really we don't need to look at the others too closely. Obviously they all get better by each step, but in the end really the best you can get is the flying 10-inch guy, and he needs 1.5 activations to get across. So you can definitely take your time with these guys if you have one of those missions coming up. So that's the one scenario we wanted to look at and just get a grasp of how much different really these movement values make. And I think that's quite clear. So movement 3 is so bad that you don't even need to try really. If you don't have 6 turns in the battle, you don't even need to start running towards the other side because you won't make it. If you have movement 4, you definitely can. Movement 5, for sure, even in 4 turns. And so on. I think that's what this really is about. I think what's surprising to me here is that flight doesn't really do that much. Sometimes it's just enough to push you over the border, but just adding the fly keyword without extra movement often doesn't really do a lot, because as you can see, all really you have to cross more is 4 inches if you don't have flight, even on the densest terrains. So yeah, flight not as important as one would think. However, our second scenario is I called it chase enemy. And so what I've done here is I've said, like, okay, this is a platform, just a building, whatever, and there's an enemy on top of it. You need to catch it, right? There's a lot of missions where you need to kill like a hammer squad, or you need to catch a leader or blood marked, whatever. So you will have a building and will have one opponent on top of it. I said, okay, he's 1 inch away from the side, so you can stand on it. And your fighter is going to be 3 inches away from the building to start with. So that's what you can see down here. This is what I'm starting off with. Now, I did the same thing, right? I calculated, okay, you're going to need 7 inches of movement to get there, because you'll need to move 3 inch up to the wall, 3 inch up the wall, and then 1 inch onto the platform so you can stand and attack the other guy. With a movement 3 character, that's going to be more than 2 actions, which is really bad, because thinking about it, that means you can only walk up to the wall and you can't get on top of it, because if you move 3 inches towards the wall, you then cannot move 3 inches up the wall in one action. So you're going to fall down if you try. So there's really no point. You'd have to walk up to the wall in one action and then basically pass your turn. And then on the next turn, you'd be able to do a double move just to get up on the wall. So 3 inches, really bad, I think. Yeah, I think this is my main issue with the movement 3 guys. Even if they are standing on the right next to a wall, it's still going to need them take them 2 activations to get on top of it. Sorry, 2 actions, 1 activation. So they won't be able to attack after. So if this guy had fly, the guy with the 3 inch movement, he'd still need 2 activations to get towards the enemy. Because obviously with 1 activation he'd only make it to the platform, and then he'd need another one to get on top of the platform. But yeah, that means in his second activation, so in battle round 2 basically, he'd be able to swing twice before the guy without fly even reaches the enemy. So this is why I put in this extra attacks from fly, just to make sure people realize that by flying, even though flying models will often have lower damage output overall, because you're basically paying points for flight, flying models will still get more attacks in over the course of a battle, which might mean that you will benefit from flight there and get your damage worth that way. So for movement 3, it's very important. Movement 4, 5, and 6, you can see for all of those, flight is again going to give you another action, because all of these guys need 2 full actions to get next to the wall, up on top, and stand next to the enemy fighter, and they won't be able to attack them after. Now the guys with 7, 8, 9, 10 movement, they will be able to move up to the wall, climb on top, and attack the enemy fighter in this scenario. So they won't lose any movement as compared to the flying guys. So take, for example, Slanesh. They have the Fiends, for example. They can climb, they can move 8 inches, or take the Dog for the Untamed Beasts. Those fighters who can move 8 inches, I think these guys don't really need the fly keyword, because they can still get in there and attack for this exemplary scenario. Obviously, if we would change the difference from 3 inch to 4 inch or 5 inch, that would change again, but that's a different story. So yeah. Anyways, I think that highlights the real issue with movement 3, which is that you won't be able to attack at all after moving, because you'll always need 2 actions to just get on top of a wall. Right, guys. I hope this was helpful to you and gave you a big insight into how all of this would work. Yeah, I'm still going to keep looking at these things. I still don't know how I can put a point cost basically onto the movement. It's quite difficult to see how I can like compare and contrast units on based on their movement. But I think this already gives you a good insight into how movement works in general and how important it can be sometimes. Right. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you guys next time, and that's Redo signing out.